Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Allie. I hold many hats, but right now I am a mental health advocate with the honor and privilege of sharing an interview that I did with the incredibly talented Marco Rudy. This legend is a comic book artist and author of the brilliant tale of lost fantasy known as RDW. He has done amazing work for both Marvel and DC with their most recent comics and has continued to write a series of comics that have an emphasis on such topics as addiction, depression, and identity. Due to a number of factors, I was unable to get this interview out as soon as I'd hoped, as this was recorded in October 2023. But the concepts and ideas shared are still more than relevant, and I hope that they can stimulate some thought for you. Please do me the favor of checking out the description below, as it has a link to Marco's linktree, which guides you to where you can buy his book RDW and its upcoming sequels. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy. So thank you so much for meeting with me today. I've been so excited for this conversation, despite all of the technical difficulties I've had recently. This conversation has been the one I've been looking forward to for a while now. And it is because we've had such an interesting conversation. We had many conversations at Fan Expo in Toronto. And they were all surrounding this concept of trauma. And you have done a brilliant job bringing to life what it feels like to go through the process of trauma. So I want to first start off by talking about a little bit who you are, how you've got to where you're at now, and what was the hobby of choice that you turned to when you did not feel at your best? And is it art like you do for a profession?
Yeah, essentially, it's always been. Uh, so there, the answers to my questions are normally very lengthy stories because I have led less than traditional life. I've lived in three different continents and that have kind of colored my vision, my view of things. But I'm originally from Mozambique, which is a country near South Africa. I grew up in Mozambique and I left when I was 19. Went to Portugal first, then to Brazil, in which I lived nearly 10 years, and then moved to Canada, where I am now. I've been here for the past nearly 13 years as well. And I that is a very, very fast and loose answer. We can go into detail about
I just kind of want to
like
know
my
what it
journey.
was like for you to live in so many places. I'm getting the impression that you moved kind of young. Is
Yeah,
that the case? Or
yeah.
so what was it like, without getting too personal if you don't want to,
Hmm.
what was that like for you?
It was eye-opening. I there's too many ways of answering this question. Trying to find like uh, a way of starting it. Like doing art was always my coping mechanism. I've had quite a problem with bullying when I was a kid,
Mm,
and the way how rigid my household was, and that informed me my daily life, to be honest.
right.
And drawing and eventually reading comics was my venting mechanism, to the point that sometimes I would hide in my closet to go either draw or to read comics, to be in my own little world. And I never thought that working in this industry was going to be a reality for me, because where I'm from, it wasn't. I didn't see anybody from the continent, much less my country, working in comics, in American comics. So when I was in Brazil, I was encouraged by teachers to start working in comics, and even so, I didn't think that that was something for me. So when an opportunity
What drew
arose,
you to comics specifically?
um,
Was
uh,
it a specific issue? Was it a specific artist or author?
a little bit like I grew up reading French comics,
Okay.
actually, the Asterix and the like. And I think around 8 or 9, a friend of mine, a combination of two, a friend of mine had bought an issue of a miniseries by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller from the Wolverine. It's called The Wolverine.
Right.
They actually made a movie out of that,
Mm-hmm.
Wolverine in Japan. And I had the issue that he had, like the cover was so iconic that I had nightmares over that, and I was hooked immediately that, and a combination of that and of my friend also having a issue from the X Factor, the first 5 X Factor. So it was when Jean Grey, Cyclops, Beast, Angel, and Bobby Drake, the Iceman, formed the X Factor. They were like a government agency kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my into American comics. After that,
Right.
there was
Okay.
no way back. I wasn't allowed to read comics, bear in mind. So that was also part of the problem. So
Oh my goodness, that's what pulled you in, huh? That
yeah,
happened to me when
like
I was a kid.
for
It was like
the
everything that you were told. No, sorry.
yeah. I was let's just say a difficult kid, and there were uh, I would
I
say
prefer
that
to say
there
curious, but I don't
sorry.
know. You might have seen, you might have seen difficult, but I don't know. It might have
Oh
just been
yeah.
curious. I feel like it's curious that I.
What I would say is that for my parents' understanding at the time, and even science or the science that was afforded to us in Mozambique at the time, I was just a difficult kid. I'm
Right.
pretty sure that from a test that I've done and actual consultations that I need to do, that problem child is just code word for a bunch of like ADHD, anxiety, depression, like a bunch of stuff that had causes, yes, but that is also caused just by your chemical disposition in your brain.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure that yeah, that was the problem child caused, but at the time that was the reason, and the
Right.
treatment was less than ideal. Anyways, but it would essentially drive me to go do art in my corner, to read comics when I wasn't allowed, and eventually, like I think the first time I bought I bought a comic that it was okay. My parents bought to me. I was like 15 or 16 or something like that. And all that time I had been reading comics since 8, but
Right.
I wasn't encouraged to do so. Let's just say that.
Right.
And but in Brazil, my teachers, they kept encouraging me, you should work in comics. And eventually through that pushing, I got to work in comics. That was basically that.
Oh my goodness. That
Yeah.
is a crazy inspiring story
Thank you.
to think about, bouncing back from not being allowed to to do something to making it your world is absolutely wonderful in my opinion. To
Oh,
use that
yeah.
as a
It,
channel,
I
more
can tell you,
importantly.
I can tell you that it took a while. I'm moving this because the stand is a little bit wobbly. So I
No
apologize.
problem. You're all good.
The it took a while for my parents to acquiesce to that because oof, that was also a problem that became a problem again when I started working in comics. So I'm
Okay,
right.
so we talked about a little bit of your journey in childhood, kind of briefly, and how you found comics. And I kind of wanted to bounce off of that and talk about your relationship with trauma and
Yep.
how it became your inspiration for your book, RDW, which I've read. It's fantastic. It's sitting right in front of me and it makes me happy and sad at the same time. um, but we're going to talk about why that is in a few minutes. But Why were you inspired to write RTW?
It's the irony in all of this is that it like all the paths that I took to arrive to this book, they were completely unrelated to trauma at all. It was like essentially, I can try to make this brief again or expand.
No,
In any
don't
case,
expand. Talk
yeah,
about as
okay,
much as you want to talk about. Don't limit
okay.
yourself.
So in 2016, I pitched a mini series to Marvel. At the time, I was getting a lot of work at Marvel, and I had a conversation, like a meeting with the then editor in chief. I pitched a mini series for them, and while I pitched that, I and another friend of mine, we started discussing the idea of, because he was helping me with that mini series. We were discussing the idea of doing a work that is personal, create our own story. So I always wanted. There's a lot of movies that I've seen, games that I've played, and stories that I've consumed that I left me asking why.
Right.
Why is this? Why is that? How did this come to be? And one of those stories was, if you're familiar with the Matrix series of
Hmm.
movies and the Animatrix specifically, the Animatrix is a series of shorts that inform the world of the Matrix, and one of them is two of them of those episodes are they're called the Second Renaissance, which is
Hmm.
how the machines got sentience, how they got accepted by the humans, and how eventually a war erupted between the two. And I was always fascinated by that. One of the things that triggered, like the main trigger, was a nanny robot that was caring for a child that got sentience and eventually killed the person, the father of the child that they should care for,
Right.
and then that caused this conflict between the machines, because machines wanted sentience, they wanted to be accepted as sentient and whatnot. So the mini series that me and my friend were trying to pitch, to be honest, it was me and he was helping me out,
Right.
was how that robot got sentience. and
Okay.
and in my mind
How the
it was
child robot got sentience
no,
before
no, no,
they.
the robot that is caring for this child,
I'm tracking.
how it,
Okay.
yeah, how it got
I'm
sent,
sorry. I got it
yeah,
reversed. Sorry.
that eventually wanted it to rebel, then eventually had them kill the parent there.
Right.
And so I had a concept where this robot would live in a dual world. It was called 01, like a binary code. It was the ones
Right.
and zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on zero, they would be living their normal procedural life where they have to care for this child. And
Right.
one of the things they had to do for the child was to read a book for them to sleep.
Okay.
And book would be something akin to the never-ending story.
Mm-hmm.
And when the child would go to sleep, the robot would go on standby mode, and on standby mode eventually dream. And
Mm-hmm.
in dream it would have this avatar in this magical world and would explore a bunch of adventures, and those adventures would eventually inform the character in their real world today for them to achieve conscience, to be
Oh,
creative and
interesting.
whatnot. So
Okay.
as I started focusing more and more on the fantasy side of that, I felt myself even more compelled by it. I'm like, you know what? I started creating stories on the fantasy side and started reading about like famous characters that I could incorporate. In fact, at some point, the Iceni queen Boudica was like a central character. I'm like, oh yeah, this character is very important. And I started focusing on that character, which comes to the second part of this, which
Mm-hmm.
is I have always been a fan of the Witcher novels. Uh,
Okay.
I played the first game. I loved it. I read the first book that was available in English, and all at the time. This is 2010, I think.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, all of the remaining books of the saga, they were not translated in English. So
Right.
I would go to forums to get fan translations in PDF, and I don't like reading e-files, but I was consuming that. Like it was
Right.
my life. And one of the things that I really love that Andrei Sapkowski does in his books is that he may be telling you a story about a fantasy setting where this Witcher guy is super mutant and kills monsters and whatnot, but he
Right.
tells stories about real people
Mm.
in this fantasy setting. So I became more and more drawn towards that. And CD Projekt Red, the company that publishes the games, had a contract with Dark Horse to
Mm-hmm.
publish books. And I knew editorial at Dark Horse, so I kept pitching myself as the artist. Like, I'll do whatever. I just want to tell a story in that universe.
Right.
And
Yeah.
all my attempts were void because I kept
No.
trying
How
and they were going for somebody
heartbreaking.
else.
Oh.
So as they were going for somebody else, I was like, well, maybe I could use this opportunity to start informing my fantasy world of this story that I'm creating in
Right.
with the way that I would like to tell my story in the Witcher universe. And this is where it came to me trying to focus on I should tell a story that is relatable.
Nice.
Spoiler alert for anybody that has read the Witcher books. It's very simple. It's a man afraid of commitment becoming a father, a mother really wanting to be a woman really wanting to be a mother but being unable to, so
Mm-hmm.
she wants to have a family, and a parentless child wanting to have a family, wanting to have a father, wanting to have a mother, and they am eventually converging to creating a family and protecting that family.
Right.
It's honestly one of my favorite stories I've ever read. It's way more. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of a bunch of stuff happening there. But one thing that the book also has is that the reality of the people living in the times of war that the book portrays. Yeah, there's monsters. There's all of that stuff. Is very compelling. So uh, I eventually just ditched my whole idea with the robot and the fantasy. Like it was just a fantasy story. So it quickly became something that I called something of lost fantasy, where I would populate a world with fantasy and folklore that people are not used to. Like I would use folklore from, I don't know, South Africa, Brazil, even as I use folklore that is known, and populate the world with those stories, the same way that Sapkowski does with Norse mythology, Polish folklore, and at the same time tell a story that would be personal. And as I'm going about telling a story that would be personal, I remembered two things. I remember another game that I played called Hellblade of Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade is a game about mental health. It is visceral in the way it depicts people. In my opinion, obviously, I'm not an expert. I saw the documentary that they did around the game, all the research that they did around schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, um, psychosis, what triggers it, and I was fascinated by it. The game hit me really, really hard on the mental health, all the, and I was like, you know what? I like how this story made me feel, and I like how like it was again playing that game, especially the way it ends. It is
Right.
a gut punch. So if anybody would like to try, I strongly recommend and play with headphones because one of the mechanics that the game has is that the character has voices in their head, and the
Mm.
way it is done, it is that it is done in like a surround sound. It is hard to
It's
describe
powerful.
just how
Yeah.
powerful that story and the storytelling device is on somebody that is affected by some of it in a way. So it was that, and my last piece of point of inspiration was the first Rambo movie. I have never read the book, but I've seen that movie countless times. And the gist of the movie is somebody is a veteran affected by inner demons. It's a person that is broken, trying to reincorporate them in society, and just how society just doesn't welcome them. So after that, I had, like, in my mind, I had my character, I had my setting, and I just needed to find a story to tell. And my story, to be honest, is the it, I don't want to spoil the story because I know how it ends. I know everything. What's it about? But it's essentially about the journey. The middle, the beginning, middle, and end are almost trivial because I want the reader to be a part of this journey, just to feel, to see what's happening to this character, their friends, and essentially how their friends react to what's happening to the character. So I am now telling a story about a veteran that is dealing with inner demons over the fact that they are a veteran, and about the fact that through the setting, they consume a stimulant to be potent in whatever it is that they do, a highly addictive stimulant. And they are dealing with detoxing from that stimulant throughout the whole journey of the 5 books that I have planned. Everything around symptoms of that. Obviously, I did quite a bit of research. I talked to people that are,
I was
I
going to
feel like,
mention that you mentioned at Fan Expo you talked to a
yeah,
lot of friends and stuff, and
yeah,
they
yeah,
validated the experience that you portrayed, at least in your first book.
yeah.
Um,
Because
and
it's important for me that I am delving into something that is at this point outside of my area of expertise. Yes, I have dealt with trauma, and I've used that to infer, like, there's quite a bit of the story or some of the characters that I'm populating the world with that are expression of myself, of different situations that I've seen, that I've had to deal with. I give you an example. One of the characters, and there's a scene that is very subtle in the book. There's a character that is a F elf. They don't like being an F elf, and
yeah.
that is a symptom of something that I've experienced growing up, because I'm mixed race, and where I was from at the time, like, the most common thing that I would hear is, I have no flag. Like, I am neither white nor black nor brown nor nothing. I was just something. And this character deals with some of that. It's just that, contrary to me, the guy is complete in denial. So that's something that I'm exploring in this world. Just a minor little tidbit for something to come. So yeah, I created the story from those bits and pieces, and I am now doing my best to do the do the research, talk to people, see what I can and what I cannot say with confidence, put it out there, and I'm essentially one book one. I am this conversation is my quote unquote reaping the rewards,
Mm.
because I know that you mentioned that I there are some things that I touch on in the book that have you reacted in a more visceral way. There's a friend just before that it was more on the addiction side, that I told him when he purchased the book, I know that you have gone through some of this. You will see a moment that I tried my best to convey a specific situation. If I did it right, you will see it. If I did it wrong, you will also see it, and you will come tell me. And he came to tell me, like, all right, I reacted this way. It was done like this. I liked it because of this. If you want, I can help you with this other way. There are other ways to portray even more effects of this. And I'm like, yeah, 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 give me all of that. So, so yeah, I think in a roundabout way, I have answered your question.
No, yeah.